I had a great baseball season last summer. I was making, I would say, 3 to 5 bets a week, and I got limited on 2 different books throughout the summer, and I profited about $30,000. And a big reason why I profited, again, no tiny violins here, only $30,000. Whoa, got confetti raining down on me on the broadcast here.
You got a party going on.
You made 30 grand. You made 30 grand. Confetti started pouring on me.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Lines, the only podcast purifying the sports betting industry. Remember to like, download, subscribe, follow us on all the socials at InPlayLive. And if you want to see what it's all about on the inside, we've got that promo code for you, Behind the Lines, all caps. You'll get the very best pricing to see what InPlay Live is all about. All right, on today's show, a sports agent writes an op-ed in the New York Times. There's fears of a betting tax contagion. And this is June. What does sports betting look like in this month? All right, I'm your host, Shane Mercer, and as always, joined by Andrew Pace, the founder of InPlay Live. Pace, how are you, buddy?
Doing great, Shane.
Good to see you, as always. I want to kick things off here with this sort of interesting op-ed that I saw in the New York Times, authored by a guy named Lee Steinberg. He's a sports agent, a well-known longtime sports agent. He's represented the likes of Patrick Mahomes, Troy Aikman, Manny Ramirez, just to name a few. And the title of his article is Sports Betting is a Ticking Time Bomb. And he's essentially arguing that it's integrity that's going to get blown up. So in this article, he essentially argues that legal sports betting is going to ruin the integrity of professional sports. He's saying, it already is. He's pointing to Jonte Porter and the Shohei Ohtani scandals. Also mentioned that the MLB is now investigating Ohtani's former teammate David Fletcher, who is now part of the Braves organization. So he's being investigated for placing wagers with the same bookie that Ohtani's interpreter was using. In this article, he also makes reference to the 1919 World Series. Pace, I don't know how familiar you are with baseball history, but this was the Chicago Black Sox scandal, in which the White Sox players allegedly helped fix the World Series. So it's a sort of famous fix there. He makes the case, that with so much of the sports economy now revolving and sort of being integrated with the betting companies, that we're just going to see this erosion of integrity. He believes the leagues need to intervene. But what's interesting is that in this piece, he doesn't really say what that intervention should look like or could look like, only that they need to do something. So what do you think, Pace? Do you think that sports betting, has the potential to ruin the integrity of our big professional leagues?
So the world's collapsing.
Yes.
Everything's falling apart. AI robots are going to kill us. No one can agree on politics. The world's burning. Sports betting's ruined. Sports are ruined. Like, so much is like clickbait media, fear mongering, and all that kind of stuff. Like a really good example of the whole fear of e-commerce was like, oh, Amazon's going to run every other store in the world basically out of business.
Yeah.
And just completely ignoring the fact that has it made an impact on retail? Of course it has. But just completely ignoring the fact that like people actually want to go try clothes on sometimes and like go to the mall with their friends or go to the mall on a rainy day, and then you pop into a brick and mortar store and actually potentially buy something instead of buying it online. Like there's a place in the marketplace for like a whole series of different technological advances, and then a whole series of ways that I guess the old school or past way is going to, continue to be present and be of demand, for lack of a better term. I mean, you kind of said it in the article, like since 1919, this shit's been happening. So legalized sports betting, all of a sudden it's exploded. Like every game's rigged, and like this whole psychology of everyone blaming someone else for like the reason that they lost. I think the whole mindset of a certain ref favoring a certain team or a certain player that's got a motive outside of his team's motive, the list goes on and on and on, is it lacks ownership. It's putting your wager and the bet that you took in someone else's hands, and it justifies why it lost, because there's no way you could have lost on your own. Like there's no way you could have picked a losing side of a game. It's nuts. So it exists. It exists since 1919. Do we have all the details? No. Is there an argument that could be made that, the mob running casinos in Vegas and sports books having a greater influence than, like, say, a legalized, regulated landscape? 100%. Sports betting's been legalized in North America since 2018. So here we are 6 years later saying it's now going to ruin it. Wouldn't it already been ruined? And then, like, with what we do at In Play Live with live betting, it's like, could that affect us? Sure. Has it? Maybe. Do I care? Like, no. I don't know. When you're wagering live, it's based on what's already happening. So I find that if you were to make an argument that the game was rigged from the beginning, you would have seen it happening on the screen, and you could have adjusted to it based on what you are watching. So I don't know. I think the whole doom and gloom message with no solution is just a total cop-out move. And if regulators are looking to make this landscape clean, and by the way, this was one of the biggest reasons people were saying that sports betting shouldn't be legalized, because they said that this would now happen more, but they went through with it anyways. And also the whole nil stuff in college football, they said that would totally ruin the integrity of the game. And of course, things like that make an impact. But we're still here. We're still watching sports. I think we had the highest viewership ever in a women's game this year. We had the most viewed Super Bowl of all time. This NBA Finals probably going to get some pretty big traction, I think, as well. So,
Yeah. You're right. Like, interest in sports and people watching has definitely, skyrocketed in a lot of areas, especially in sort of sports where, historically people weren't watching, like, women's basketball, for example, as sort of the most sort of, the one that's kind of out there right now in our faces, and we can kind of look to as an example of that. I guess I'm wondering, though, does he have a point in maybe thinking that we're going to see more pro athletes get caught up in these sort of scandals? And, does the league need to do something about the way it restricts players and how they can bet? And I know that they, different leagues already have these restrictions in place, but I'm wondering if maybe, what might a solution be, if there even is a problem here?
Right. So, like, as a general statement, like the Calvin Ridley thing in the NFL, the guy was making parlays on other teams. It wasn't anything that he could influence. And he lost. Shohei Ohtani thing, it's his interpreter, right? That's what we're saying it is.
Yeah.
Did the guy win or lose? He lost like freaking years of Shohei's salary.
Yeah, right? It was like 40 million or something.
So we're not necessarily talking about guys winning a bunch of money here, So, like, if anyone does need to get involved, I think it's the leagues themselves. Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, as we all know, if you have Ohtani, who now lost his interpreter as his bettor, and he still wants to make a bet, do you think he'll be able to go place a bet somewhere? Like, I'm pretty sure he can get someone to place a bet for him. I'm pretty confident that he's going to be able to do that. So the sports books, there's not much that they can do. I know we talked about it on a different episode where they only offer certain sides of bets, which would just be freaking disgusting for the bettor. But it is the leagues, and the way they crack down on it and how they handle it, I think, needs to be pretty severe, because I actually, I was kind of talking all gloom and doom there. But if the league does get involved and you do have a guy that has been proven to be betting, the punishment should be pretty harsh, because separately of all of that, it does, if it is like what Jonte Porter was doing, it does affect the integrity of the game. So It does happen. I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't happen. I just think that, like, as a general statement, the leagues aren't plagued with it. Players show up, they make an insane amount of money on their salaries and on their endorsements, and they play to win. And that integrity has been baked into sports since day one. Are you telling me, separate of gambling, there aren't times where you're going to have a few players on the team that just don't want to be there? A team that just didn't make the playoffs and still has to play a regular season game that's like, fuck this, I'd just rather go home right now. Like, their motives are in question, right? So there's always going to be motivational changes from game to game and from person to person. One person is fulfilling their life's purpose on a team. The other person might be getting a paycheck. And you're going to have that in any organization, anywhere you go, right? So, motivations are always in question. It's one of the ways that we make money at In Play Live is figuring out what those motivations are in certain circumstances and then capitalizing on them based on a discrepancy there. So, come down with a harsh punishment from the league. Maybe a punishment so harsh that it doesn't even seem fair. Set an example. And a guy like Ohtani has immunity because he's Shohei Ohtani. He's like the best player in baseball. He's the face of the league. He's the face of international fans that otherwise would not be there, right? Ichiro Suzuki, Shohei Ohtani, like, they bring in fans by the millions, right? If they put that aside and they said, hey, buddy, you were involved in this. It's your guy. He was your responsibility. You're done. Like, it would really send a message. I don't know if I agree with it. I'm just saying that, if you take harsh and extreme action, you might find that, a guy who is making a great paycheck goes, I don't want to risk this.
Yeah. We've also seen from the leagues that they don't always necessarily think about sports betting as a top priority, and they don't necessarily know everything that the books are doing, as we sort of saw from Gary Bettman a few months ago. Not knowing about sports books limiting players, and I imagine that in a lot of ways, the sports betting side of things is just sort of just another issue in the pile of things that leagues and commissioners have to deal with. It will be interesting to see, though, what they do, because I think if there's any point in here that made by this agent, Lee Steinberg, it's that I think we can expect to see more instances of players doing things in the sports betting realm that the league says they shouldn't be doing. And we probably will eventually have to see some kind of crackdown in the various leagues. So that'll be sort of something to kind of watch for.
Well, Shane, one of the things that you just mentioned there is like, hey, it's June, right? Well, what do we see in June in the NFL? What do we see in May in the NFL quite a bit? We crime is up in the NFL. We see players that get into trouble in the off season.
Yeah, a lot of players doing stupid stuff. Yeah.
And people are like, oh, what do you expect? Like, they're not with their team right now. They're more likely to act out, kind of thing. Or they're young and have too much money that they know what to do with. So they go off and do stupid things, or Superman syndrome, or they think they're invincible, or whatever the case may be. And obviously some pretty serious stuff has happened over the years. Like, obviously Henry Ruggs being a recent one, but like, put that lens now with betting being legalized, like, shit is going to keep happening. It might be betting related, it might not be. It'll happen in all arenas, and that's just the nature of human beings. So you could be like, oh, create a harsh punishment, like I just said. Henry Ruggs is like in jail for life. He still went out and what happened, right? So like, shit is still going to happen. That's just the reality of humanity, right?
Yeah, and we'll see people continue to sort of jeopardize their careers, even if it is for a negative EV 10 leg parlay or something, right? It's like just something totally stupid. But yeah, you're right. We're probably guaranteed to continue to see that kind of stuff. Okay. I don't want to stay all doom and gloom, but this is sort of a little bit of doom and gloom from the sports books point of view. And an update on a topic we touched on last week. So we talked about taxation in the state of Illinois. Well, Illinois has upped their tax to 40% at least for DraftKings and FanDuel. And those two sports books have something like 90% of the market share in the state when it comes to sports betting and online sports betting. So they're seeing their tax rate in that state go up to 40%. The state's also raising the minimum tax for low volume sports books to 20%. So it's a tiered tax system when it comes to sports books in the state of Illinois. Ohio also raising its tax rate from 10% to 20%. And in the article I was reading, a Sportico article, which sort of looks at all things in the business of the sports world. That's kind of the nature of the publication. They quote this one analyst who's saying that Wall Street is saying that states see sports betting as an easy path to increase tax revenue, and there's a contagion risk. That term is coming from Benjamin Shelley, a UBS betting stocks analyst, a warning of this contagion risk that other tax-hungry states are going to see states moving their tax rates up, and they're going to want to move theirs up as well. And they're saying that it's going to be bad for the operators. Now, the only possible good side is that the operators may be allowed to open up more online and mobile casino games, which could potentially, be more profitable for the operators. But this idea of tax contagion risk, Pace, do you think this is something that the sports books should be worried about?
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
Well, if we talk about, the Massachusetts stuff where they're talking about not limiting players, that's not good for the book. And if that rolls off state by state, that's going to make them less profitable. If the books have higher taxes to pay and it works in one state and they go, why can't we do that here? Ohio did it. Why don't we? Illinois did it. Why don't we? That could snowball as well. The public nature of the Massachusetts hearing leads to the potential for, if those operators then show up and expose all their practices, then all the other states seeing that, and then that snowballing as well, or becoming a contagion. Right? So yeah, I think it's definitely a factor. I find the world is so fucked up in so many ways. And I know we're talking like, oh, it's all gloom and doom. And then I'm like, this place is fucked. Well, the reason why I say it is because you have a revenue stream that does not exist. There's an illegal offshore market where billions of dollars are being wagered. No one wants you to legalize this stuff because of the potential problems that it could have on the area in which it's legalized. It gets legalized because you kind of take this mindset of it's happening anyways and we might as well capitalize on the tax dollars. So now you have a new channel of tax revenue coming into the government. And rather than being like, oh, this is great, we're getting 20% of the book's profits here as tax revenue, you go, let's up it to 50. Like, you just press a button and you're like, give me more money. Yeah, it's just bullshit. It's bullshit.
Yeah, if you're an operator, you're probably looking at this like, yeah, thinking exactly that. That's complete bullshit. How do you go and ramp it up that quickly? That amount. And we've seen too that these a lot of these sports books aren't profitable yet. So are they, just because they're raking in, bringing in a lot of revenue in terms of betting dollars from any particular jurisdiction, the sports books themselves are still struggling to turn a profit. And if they got to start paying, I know that New York is at 51% or something. So this tax rate in Illinois kind of gets a little closer to that, and Pennsylvania's up there as we mentioned last week in the high 30s. So I don't know that they can afford it, especially if it's happening in every state, right?
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of things that pushes the player back offshore. We've talked about that a lot. Like, what does all of this lead to? It leads to the player going back offshore. It leads to the player going back to a local bookie. It leads a player to the, quote, illegal methods of wagering. Well, what about the sports books? Like, they're gonna go back to Curacao. fuck Illinois. Like, we'll operate in the gray market and operate to jurisdictions that we don't have to pay such obscure amounts of tax to. Survival is important, and when there's a power that has that level of control that just presses a button. And meanwhile, I always find it ironic because the worst run businesses on the planet, as a general statement, are governments. Like, they don't handle money properly. They go into huge amounts of debts. They spend frivolously. They spend money on things that most people probably wouldn't prioritize, and they run out. And then they just press a button and say, give us more money at the business's expense or at the individual's expense. And sometimes when you look at the flow of money and how there's like these compounded taxes being put on it, from the corporation paying it to the individual paying it, and then the individual going to buy their goods and services and then them paying again on top. It's compounding all around us at all times. And there's a reason for it. We have to pay for healthcare and infrastructure and roads and all these other things that are required. But again, from a business standpoint, they're not run properly. Again, as a general statement there.
Yeah. I think a lot of people
and then
out
they
there
have
would
the
agree with
power to
that.
do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The governments, government spending in so many different areas, so many countries and jurisdictions could get completely out of control. But I don't want to get too far down into the political world here, because things can get a little tense, especially with an election taking place in the United States this year.
Left wing, right wing, it doesn't matter. I think most people can agree that there's a lot of things that they don't agree on.
Yeah, exactly. And the government will always be there asking for more money, and the operators are pulling in huge amounts of revenue. They'll be there with their hands out and looking for more all the time. Okay, let's get to the beating the books side of things now. Pace, this is June. We've just entered a new month.
Yes.
And traditionally, I think Get In Play Live, Pace, this has sort of been part of the downtime of year, really kind of getting, summer begins in this month of June. And we sort of get into these dog days of summer. And they're kind of just around the corner here. But things aren't necessarily as slow, or maybe they won't be as slow this year as they have in past years. I want to kick things off with a conversation around baseball, because, Pace, we are just coming off of a weekend stream, a Sunday baseball only stream at In Play Live, which is pretty unusual. And I think this was the first one of the season, right? That was sort of just with a baseball focus. And I got to say, the team on the stream absolutely crushed it. I think, what was it, 4 for 4 or 5 for 5 on some of the main market plays that were called on stream. It was really impressive to watch, and I think anybody who isn't a part of In Play Live, now might be a good time to join, because you can catch up on these sorts of strategies that are being deployed throughout the summer, while learning and preparing yourself for the football season and the really sort of busy sports season that kind of takes place from September through to the end of March. But if you are already a part of In Play Live, Pace, and for people who are members already, they're probably wondering, and they've been here a little while, they might be wondering, hey, what's going on behind the scenes that could be leading to more potential baseball opportunities?
So are you asking me that, Shane?
Yeah, I am.
Well, you were on the stream yesterday, right?
I was.
Yeah. So yeah, we killed it. It's a small sample size, right? But I've been pretty open about my baseball journey. So I'll kind of touch on that a little bit. As a recreational bettor, always fun to have some summer action. You're at the pool, at the beach, on the boat. You get a nice refresh in there, maybe a couple run lines on a parla. Always good fun. Definitely negative EV and expected losses is in the agenda there. And then when we launched In Play Live, I think naturally what happens is, if you have a betting group that's focused on winning and you love a certain sport, you are now going to look at that certain sport differently than you looked at it before. So in my case specifically, we had the COVID bubble season of NBA and NHL playoffs, and then the fanless NFL and college football season starting. And then we had a weird baseball season that year where baseball wasn't as affected as the other sports, because It's outdoors, and they just went with like no fans, and a lot of the baseball season, it was affected, but a lot of the baseball season was played. But we had playoff baseball at the same time as we usually do. Well, for me, playoff baseball is at a time where football is more of a focus for me. I don't really care that much about following playoff baseball, through October and November. Well, a couple of the guys in the group, started making some money betting on baseball in that baseball playoff season. So much so that there was a couple strategies that I was jumping on myself, that were really profitable in that playoffs. Astros Dodgers comes to mind. A few different bets we took there. And that rolled us into the next baseball season, where I got pretty excited about the regular season because of the profits that we had in the playoffs. And a couple guys in the group that had done really well. And I just got crushed. Like, I got crushed. I went into baseball thinking to myself, like, okay, I'm going to make money this year. I'm making money on all the other sports. Let's just roll in those same unit sizes into this new season and go from there. Yeah, like I'm talking multiple six figures. Like, I think I lost like 300 G's that summer.
Wow.
And I did it in a way that, number one, it was within my bankroll at the time. Number two, I did it with like this belief, like, we can do this. And it was a little strange because a lot of it for me was just following and not learning. Like, I was not learning. I was mostly just following. And I also too, there might be people that had a great summer that I'm referencing. I wasn't in for all of it, so I'm coming in and out. Yeah, I got hit pretty hard. Had that all back and more, within a month or two of that football season. So it's like, you don't need to, there's no tiny violins over here, and then the next season I approached things definitely much more cautiously, and still didn't necessarily do well. And that led me to last summer, where I wasn't like, okay, this is going to be how, like, I'm making money on baseball, all this kind of, no, it wasn't like that. It was like, this is tough, and I know it's tough, and I'm going to be here as a member of this team, and I'm going to see what I can do, where, when, how I can do it. And this is also years of collaboration at this stage, referencing last summer. And I had a great baseball season last summer. I was making, I would say, 3 to 5 bets a week, and I got limited on 2 different books throughout the summer, and I profited about $30,000. And a big reason why I profited, again, no tiny violins here, only $30,000. Whoa, got confetti raining down on me on the broadcast here.
You got a party going on.
You made 30 grand. You made 30 grand. Confetti started pouring on me. But the reason it was only 30 grand was because I wasn't betting heavy on anything. I think probably the biggest wager I made would have been about $2,000. Like, I really was very cautious, which this MLB season I've already wagered quite a bit more than that on some of the bets that I've called. But last season kind of set this season up where we go, hey, like, let's not pump this and make it sound like it's going to be this great, amazing time of year. And I don't even want to have that message come across now. But let's look at some of the things that we built off of last summer and see if we can hone those in. And that came down to like just building a couple things, looking at a lot of data and compiling it over all of April and all of May. And then going, hey, maybe we have something here. Let's start poking at it and see where it goes. And that led to yesterday, which again is a small sample size. But like you said, I think we went 5 for 5 on main market wagers. And I just had a tremendous Sunday that has gotten me, we're recording this on Monday. It got me really excited for tomorrow night to stream baseball. So there's a couple big nights of baseball where you get a lot of games in a short window. And what's great about that is with a high volume sport, it does allow you to be selective, where maybe you do have 10 or 18 games on in a day, and you only end up making a couple of wagers in that entire day. You're looking at everything, you're evaluating everything, but where the sort of stars align, where you actually do get theoretical value on a great value wager, yeah, you might only get a couple.
Well, I'm looking forward to maybe tuning in for some of these baseball streams throughout the summer. There, you mentioned Tuesday, baseball Tuesday nights and Sunday midday, right? Those are 2 days out of the week that I think are pretty consistently good baseball days. And so, if you and the team are going to be streaming those days, I'm going to try to make them a priority and tune in for as much as I can because, I'm just baseball not a big part of my betting portfolio, at least for the past little while, year and a half or so, but interested to just learn and grow and sort of see what you guys are doing and kind of pick up on what you guys are putting down if it's working, and sort of roll it into my toolbox and something that I can sort of practice this year and then maybe build on next year. Yeah, but really kind of looking forward to that.
Yeah, so I think there's actually a message here that I could send out to the betting community that might be of value as well. There's a lot of like pregame baseball guys, and they will be the first to tell you that the edge in baseball sometimes doesn't even make it worth it. They'll be like,
Hmm.
"Oh, did I make money over the summer? Yeah, I did, but it was a real grind, a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of
A
energy, a
lot of
lot
them
of
have
effort."
huge bankrolls too to
Yeah.
justify their very small edges. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And so much so that they go, even with the money that they did make, it was so much work that they would have rather just taken the time off. Take that approach into the live menu, into the live game. So like there was a few of the calls yesterday, Shane, like I didn't say this to anyone, but there were games that I like loved pregame. I loved them. And then I took that knowledge into the live stream without having money on them yet, and then got to make a decision. Uh, Contrary to that, it wasn't a baseball stream, but we were focusing on some playoff sports where there was a baseball game coming in, and it was a game I loved pregame that went the completely opposite way. And we ended up capitalizing on that game as well because of the fact that I didn't have money on it. I waited for live, and I was able to let that pregame bias go based on what was going on in that particular game. And in all those examples, we happened to win those wagers. So my advice would be, if you do really like a game and you do have a couple question marks about that game, let it play out a little bit. And yes, there's going to be a time, where you're like, oh my God, they're up 4-0 already. I should have bet them. You let that go and you just don't worry about it. And I always like to say, like, even if a team is winning, the value on them is still there. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that in another sport. So let's just pretend that like Ohio State is playing an underdog like a Maryland or someone that's in their division that they would typically just obliterate. And for whatever reason, you thought that plus 21.5 on their opponent was a good line, one that would cover at a rate that provided theoretical value. And you go into that game having not wagered that pregame line, and Maryland's actually competing with Ohio State, and it's a tight game, or maybe it's not a super tight game, but they're playing football with them. It isn't just one of these completely typical like one way Alabama or Ohio State type games. Whether it's the main markets or some of the minor markets, those opportunities, even though you might have wanted that pregame line in, there are still opportunities to capitalize on it live in real time. And it puts you more in tune with the game. So if it turns, like this morning, I watched Novak Djokovic be down 2-1 and down a break in that fourth set where he's about to lose the match. And then you watch him break back, and then challenge him on the next serve where you're like, okay, Novak's turning it on now. That's kind of like a similar example where Novak is like an Ohio State where, you see him just taking over. And
Hmm.
since you're in tune with it live, maybe you can bet on the Novak or the Ohio State in that particular case. Or maybe you go, oh, shoot, like I actually am glad I didn't end up betting this pregame because I'm now watching this team who was competing with this favorite and doing really well. I'm watching them just derail, and I can see it in real time. And that's presenting an opportunity here, or that's presenting a great leave where I'm like, okay, I'm so glad that I placed that bet. So take your data, take your information, bring it live into the matchup, and don't be afraid to let go of any and all bias that you had pregame towards that team or event, and just run with it from there.
Yeah, no, great advice there. Absolutely. And, it's a great leave can often feel as awesome as a win, as an actual win, knowing that you made a great decision by not betting something. Okay. I want to talk about a few other opportunities that we're going to get this month. And these are championship opportunities. We've got the NHL Stanley Cup final, and we've got the NBA finals, both taking place this month. Let's start with hockey. Just a quickly, what can we expect from the Rangers and Florida, and what are you sort of hoping to see from the series?
Well, you said Rangers in Florida, so I expect
Whoops.
Florida to advance to the Stanley Cup final.
I had Rangers on my mind there. It was because it's been Rangers in Florida all this time
Yeah.
for the last little while. Yeah, the Oilers in Florida, Canadian team in the final.
Yeah, I really don't know. It was such a weird game to watch the Oilers just get absolutely pummeled and win the game.
Yeah,
So
destroyed on
nothing.
shots.
Nothing would surprise me. I think Florida going back to the Cup final. I mean, losing both would just be devastating to them. I can't imagine. So they're going to be freaking hungry, and they've been hungry. You can see it all playoffs how hungry they've been. From a betting standpoint, I'm hoping for a lot of Panthers leads late in games, but we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. Honestly, it's like the Super Bowl. It gets so hyped up. Everyone's tuned in. Everyone knows who's playing. And, from a betting standpoint, it's extremely low volume now. You might get excited for a game that you end up making no bets on at all.
Mm-hmm. And on the other side of things, on the basketball side of things, we've got the Mavs and Celtics. I'm hoping that we just have a nice tight series, because basketball has had a lot of blowout series this playoffs. It would be nice to see the final really sort of become a nail biter. Go to 7 games. Let's get some close games all the way through. That's what I'm hoping for. Pace, I imagine that you're kind of hoping the same.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the Mavericks are getting no credit again, and it's just fucking insane to me. So they went in. The West is better than the East. That's not some new thing.
Yeah, it's
The
been like that a
West
long time.
is better than the East. Period. They took out the 1 seed in the Thunder, and they had to play them on the road.
Mm-hmm.
They took out the Wolves, who took out the defending champions, and they had to take them out on the road.
Who arguably have one of the most exciting players in basketball in Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, but I mean, Luka Doncic is better than everybody, right? And now he's +7 heading into Boston in game 1. I don't know what's going to happen. They're just getting no credit, right? So if it's a tight series, that means there's probably going to be a lot of value on the Mavericks throughout it. Like, based on the Mavericks are paying over 3.0 or +200 to win game 1. Based on that line, it'll probably be a pick'em in Dallas at home. So Boston might be a slight favorite in Dallas. And I have no idea who's going to win. But if are you telling me Boston's going to win 4-0? Like, I think there's going to be some value on Dallas throughout the series.
Yeah, I hope so. You get them down a couple points late in the game, you could have a tremendous number on them, and all you need is a Luka 3-ball.
Yeah.
We could be looking at those kind of situations. Yeah. All right. Other sports taking place this month. We've got the WNBA in action. Pace. I know that people at In Play Live have been, some of the pros have been calling, and a lot of people have been betting on the WNBA. And I think you included. You've been getting some wagers in on the WNBA. What can we expect through this month? Just kind of more of the same, I think.
Yeah, so I'm, like I mentioned, being a follower in baseball a few years ago. I'm a follower in the WNBA. I'm just kind of listening and watching right now. It's my first year with it. That's really all I can say. The guys that have been calling it have done a great job, and yesterday swept that as well. So, I hope to continue to follow and watch my bankroll grow from it.
Yeah. Yeah, great. If anybody wants more basketball, the WNBA is there. It's not as high volume as the NBA, but you get a 4 game slate. On a day, that's a pretty good WNBA slate, and you mix it in with everything else that's taken place out there in the world of sports, and you can have yourself some really great opportunities. Anything else to watch for in the month of June, Pace? Anything else you're keeping an eye on?
Are you kidding me, man?
I kind of know where you're going with this.
We've got the third. No, we've got the fourth most popular football league.
Wow.
In North America,
fourth most,
kicking off on Thursday. Number 1 is the NFL. Number 2 is collegiate football. Number 3 is the UFL. Number 4 is the CFL.
We're still behind the UFL.
The UFL definitely attracts bigger crowds. I think they've had some big numbers in their stands. But yeah, I love betting on the CFL throughout the summer. I think there's a lot of things that they could do differently that would improve their league as a whole. I think they need to play fewer games to prevent some injuries, and I think they need to stop competing with the NFL, college football, MLB playoffs, the start of NHL, the start of NBA with their end of season. If you told me that we were a couple weeks into CFL already right now and the season wrapped up at the end of August or first week of September, right before the NFL, I think a lot more people would follow it in and could see a season from cover to cover. But yeah, regardless of that, great sport to bet on, and line discrepancies are rampant in this league. So when you're looking at 1 or 2 different sports books, you might see some pretty crazy opportunities when you're wagering on the CFL. So and it is exciting. It is a really exciting league. The way that the rules are designed is so that the game never ends. And what I mean by that is if it's even a 3-score game, we saw it last year, teams can be down 21 with like 2 minutes left and still win the game with the way the clock works and everything. So it can be pretty electric at the end of games.
When does that season kick off?
Thursday.
Holy crap. Jeez, it's upon us. It's coming. All right. Well, there we go. So, really, it's not as slow as maybe we think it is when it comes to this time of year. There's a lot going on, a lot to be excited for.
Right. Well, betting on sports is dependent on sports, right? And betting is it's seasonal, it's cyclical, right? But it changes. Lockouts, strikes, COVID bubbles, all this stuff affects it. But I find that there are so many different times of the year where I say to myself, gosh, I love this time of year. So, if you call the start of the year September, right, kickoff for NFL, you go, gosh, I love this time of year. And I don't think it needs much explanation. But one of the reasons that I absolutely love that time of year is because Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, and Friday nights tend to be pretty chill and provide great midweek balance. You fast forward to October and you got the puck dropping in NHL and the tip off in the NBA. So you go, gosh, we got all these other sports now to bet on. I love this time of year. November, you throw college basketball into the mix, both men's and women's. Now you are in the busiest time of year. So from November until the playoffs of football, that is where it is like full on. You sometimes can't even believe that you are taking time off because you're like, oh my God, I'm missing this night, which every night is just nonstop sports and is insane. So there's a beauty in that. Then you get into the NFL playoffs. Like, what more could you ask for there? And then obviously you transition into March Madness. Then from March Madness, you transition into the playoffs of the NHL and the NBA. MLB starts, the CFL starts, and then you have tennis and golf season. So, when by the time June rolls around, I go, gosh, I love this time of year because it's the summer and it is a little bit lower volume. But separately of what we've touched on this summer, there are some other sports people love to bet on, like Aussie rules football, cricket, and we have the Olympics this summer.
Yeah,
so we're going to get more high level basketball with like men's Olympics and then all the other Olympic events that can, of course, be wagered on as well. And then you blink and it's August, and August is actually the most underrated time of the year because the NFL preseason is so freaking amazing to bet on. So all of a sudden that's 12 months of betting. So you have to continually have balance with yourself, and you have to continually remind yourself of the benefits of the current time of year that you're in, from a betting standpoint, because you don't want to take any of it for granted. You want to enjoy the journey.
I'm glad you brought up the Olympics. That's sort of one that we'll have to look at a little bit later in the summer pace. Maybe we'll do a whole show on Olympics and Olympic style betting and have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought it up because it jogged my mind on another big sporting event taking place this summer. That is the Euro. Yeah. I mean, how could we be remiss to not mention the Euro, which I think begins later this month. Yeah, it begins later this month, and that's going to be awesome. And we got a lot of
imagine being a sports fan. You're listening to this podcast, and you're like, anything else going on in June pace? I'm like, the CFL. They're like, these idiots didn't even bring up the Euro. Like, oh my god, yeah. The most watched event of the year we don't even touch on.
We don't even touch on. So we'll have to talk about more about that as the month rolls on and as we get closer to the beginning of that tournament. So a lot going on at In Play Live. It is the summer, but it is not necessarily slow. Still a very, very busy time of year, and lots to kind of participate in and learn about if you're just wanting to add some tools to your tool belt in the sports betting world. There's a lot of options, a lot of opportunities there. And we will be with you through it all here on this podcast. And next week, do we ever have an amazing guest for you? This is one you are not going to want to miss. A former CEO of a sportsbook and a true trailblazer in this space. Really looking forward to having this guest on. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it is a big one coming at you next week. So really looking forward to that pace. Anything to leave our audience with before we say goodbye?
Keep beating those books.
Keep beating those bucks. Take it easy, buddy.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join In Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.